I cannot scroll even a few seconds on Facebook without coming across a meme from a liberal that says something like, conservatives are banning books. It's a narrative they've long run with, that conservatives are censorious and suppress information. And maybe that's true to a certain degree, but I don't think it's necessarily indicative of conservatives. We have the story from the Daily Mail. Quote, today the left has gone so effing far left. Joe Rogan decries liberals who are now suppressive and support the nanny state, while it's the right who are celebrating comedians and free speech. I don't think the left has gone overtly anti-free speech. I think they've developed their own insane culture. I think what's really happening is the establishment itself has always opposed anything that deviates outside the approved narrative. Always. When I bring up on Timcast IRL that the left used to be about free speech and the right was censorious, people immediately say, oh yeah, Tipper Gore, big conservative. Oh yeah, Tipper Gore, a Democrat. And Tipper Gore, the second lady of the United States, is the person who led the charge on the parental music group or whatever labeling on albums. I have the article. We'll pull it up and talk about it. But she was concerned that parents were not realizing the music their children the music being listened to by their children, there we go, contained sexually explicit or demonic influences, and that they needed to put warning labels on the music for parents. That's fascinating. I mean, that's a conservative idea today, right? Republicans saying you shouldn't be teaching kids about these things. We don't want kids exposed to this adult material. Well, that's where Tipper Gore was in 1985. So what's really happening? I'll put it simply, and then we'll talk about, all these stories that are happening right now. I think the establishment included Republicans and Democrats, and Democrats wanted new ideas introduced into the mainstream to shift culture. But for the most part, they agreed with conservatives on what was or wasn't acceptable. It was the uniparty. I remember seeing those old videos, a Republican and a Democrat, they're yelling at each other on the Senate floor or the House floor. And then afterwards, they walk over, pat each other on the back, shake hands, and that's it. You see these videos in modern times of Lindsey Graham screaming, spitting and yelling, oh, this Kamala Harris. And then he walks over and he fist bumps her because it's a uniparty. They feign disagreement. We heard this from some of the we had the Freedom Caucus, some Freedom Caucus people on Timcast IRL pointing out that Republicans and Democrats alike will purposefully not pass legislation that would get them a victory because they need the wedge issue to win elections. This is how it's always been, or it's been for a long time. Democratic voters will say, we want X. Then you'll get half the Democrats saying, we propose X, but there will be one Democrat who will go, well, we got to compromise, so we're not going to do it. The reality is, as we've been told, that the leadership will go to one of these politicians and say, don't vote yes. We don't want to repeal Obamacare. We need to complain about it to give us something to fight about. They're not actually fighting for you. What's happened now is something interesting. The old guard is fading out. Boomers, the silent generation, and even Gen Xers are starting to age out. Millennials are starting to take over. Now, of course, Gen Xers are still very much everywhere, in their 50s. Boomers, still very much leading industry, especially the wealthiest. But millennials are now grabbing the reins. And millennials on the left are very much pro-establishment. So it would appear, when you see this story about Joe Rogan, that the left is going so far left that they don't support free speech anymore. No. The left wants free speech for teachers in schools to groom your kids. The left wants free speech for books about cult ideology for your kids. They want what's best for them. So what's really happening? I think the establishment is losing. And we're seeing the emergence of a new generation. People like those in the Mises caucus of the Libertarian Party, people like you or I, probably grew up liberal, but believe in edgy comedy and free speech because we used to watch shows about this. But that edgy comedy was in line with the establishment narrative. And now that the establishment is trying to dictate where we go, they are now opposed to it. So now we have these amazing stories from Fast Company. why you need to take right-wing comedy seriously. From Joe Rogan to the Babylon Bee to Steven Crowder, the new book, That's Not Funny, deconstructs their appeal and why it matters. Joe Rogan, right-wing comedy. Joe, you say you're a liberal, but this is the world we live in. You are now a right-wing comedian. I suppose Dave Chappelle is as well, because they're all transphobes. You see, the issue is not that the left used to support free speech. They did not. And I will show you. From the Daily Mail. Speaking on Tuesday's episode of the podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan lamented that he felt Democrats had abandoned free speech and openness to other people's ideas. He said that in the past, the right was the suppressive party, but that now the left has assumed that mantle. He's not 100% right. I actually think he's mostly right, but I think it has more to do with establishment politics. The Republican Party has been taken over by populists. The Democrat Party was able to fend off, but was forced to adopt many of these ideas. Now, of course, what we're seeing is a hard cultural split. Many on the left say, you can't say racist things, and we deem that to be racist, so we will ban you. And because they have establishment institutional power, it's effective. On the right, they're saying you can't introduce these ideas to children. I happen to agree with that, but the left doesn't. The left is claiming the right is suppressing free speech, and they're supporting cancel culture. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, do you believe in reality, or do you believe in the narrative? Do you believe in the foundation of this country and the things this country was founded on, or do you just go with the flow of the establishment and what they seek to dictate for you? It's more authoritarian versus libertarian, I suppose, more than anything. I'd like to take you back in time, my friends, and give you a sort of simple history. I bring you to a Wikipedia. I'm sorry, this is not Wikipedia. This is a fan wiki for Magic the Gathering, a card game. Many of you are probably familiar with Magic the Gathering. I'm sure many of you play. I'm sure many of you don't. For those that don't, Magic the Gathering is a fantasy strategy card game. In the early 90s, there was a card called Unholy Strength. The original art featured a pentagram, considered to be a symbol for the occult and suggestive of demonic themes. As of 4th edition, which is the 4th edition of the set, it has been removed. It was the result of pressure from various groups against the demonic and satanic themes. And Christian groups started to complain about how Magic the Gathering was introducing young, defenseless minds to the influence of the devil. Such groups caused enough of a stir that Wizards of the Coast stopped producing creatures of the subtype demon for several years. Unholy Strength is by no means the only card in Magic where the art has been changed due to public outcry. Other cards, including Crusade, have been given alternate art due to public outcry. This is back in like 1996 or something. Conservative Christian groups were upset that young people were being influenced with demonic themes. Fascinating. I don't think you would see the same thing from the right today, but not too dissimilar, there's concerns about adult activities being presented to children. Now, in my opinion, artwork of a demonic nature is fine. Why? It is a fantasy theme that is not implying something is good. You are showing a man who is getting unholy power. I have no problem with that depiction because that depiction is not telling people it's to support it. Today, in the classroom, you have teachers showing books to children or children being able to collect books depicting racist ideologies or overtly adult activities. Well, that's the line for me. Is the idea supposed to be that I am now a conservative and Joe Rogan, we're both right wing because we're like, hey, yo, you shouldn't be showing children sexual activities? Think about what that means. If this is the path we are to follow, in 10 years, are we going to be far right and conservatives will be okay with children being shown graphic depictions? Think about what that means. It means they're grooming kids. They're trying to shift. When people on the right say they're trying to normalize, pedophilia, if we are going to follow in this direction, similar to how the 90s were, then that seems to be the case. To simplify, I have no problem with the pentagram art. I do have a problem with what they're showing kids. If they're now trying to apply that label to me, what does that mean 10 years from now? What will be acceptable? Take a look at this. This is from June 10th, 2020. Racist magic. Racist Magic the Gathering cards banned, removed from database by publisher. It is not the religious right that is getting the latest Magic the Gathering cards banned. 2 years ago, a bunch of cards were actually banned. Invoke Prejudice showed men in black robes with pointy hats, and it was meant to be a card about prejudice. They said this one was overtly racist, and the guy who wrote it, who drew it, apparently was racist. Crusade. A reference to the Crusades. It says all white creatures get +1/+1. You don't need to understand the game. It is a stat bonus, and it is a white spell. In Magic the Gathering, you have white magic, black magic, green magic, blue magic, red magic. White does not mean white people, and black does not mean black people. But sure enough, they've banned a bunch of cards because they were offensive. Jihad has been banned. It's a thing. Jihad is a thing. Why ban it? It's not racist to mention a thing in this theme. Cleanse. A Magic the Gathering card says all black creatures and play are destroyed. They banned this. Now, it was the religious right who banned Unholy Strength. But it was Tipper Gore, a Democrat. I don't think it was the left or the right. I think it's the establishment. And when the right was a part of the establishment, they got stuff banned. Tipper Gore, a Democrat, got stuff banned. They say the Parents Music Resource Center was an American committee formed in 1985 with the goal of increasing parental control over the access to of children to music deemed to have violent, drug-related, or sexual themes via labeling albums with parental advisory stickers. Ultimately, I don't know if they got things banned. I should clarify that. They say, ultimately the Washington wives got labeling put on these things. I think what we're seeing now is the establishment is outraged. It's angry that it can't dictate the narrative. The argument or the idea is that over time, society has drifted leftward. Every generation has been more progressive left-wing than the previous for the past 100 years. That changed with Generation Z. Probably has more to do with birthing trends than anything. But this means now that the establishment is still trying to pull everything in the progressive direction, which apparently now includes sexualizing children, which is creepy, and they're not able to. I think a big component in this is the internet and the ability of people on the right and the people who hold more traditional values being able to stand their ground. When the entirety of the media apparatus was in the control of the establishment, they could dictate what was or was not acceptable. But now, regular people have the ability to create shows like this. They can't handle it. Their attempts at shifting the culture aren't working, regardless of whether it's left or right. I think what we ultimately see is Donald Trump is anti-establishment. Joe Biden is establishment. Bill Kristol, conservative, is now pro-Democrat. Many of these conservatives I shouldn't even call them conservatives. The Republican establishment, they start like the Lincoln Project. They're now full on for Democrats. They campaign against Trump and they say, we need to restore the party of Lincoln. Then once Trump loses, they say, we're still opposed to Republicans. Why is that? Many people pointed this out saying, see, they're grifters. They're just trying to make money. I think it's because the Republican Party is being taken over by anti-establishment youthful voices. The Mises Caucus just took over the Libertarian Party. That was amazing. Take a look at this from Forbes. How Greg Gutfeld turned Fox News Channel into a late-night ratings juggernaut. Here we go. Here's the conversation. What can reverse late-night TV's decline? What do you mean? May 11th, what can reverse the decline? May 3rd, Greg Gutfeld turned Fox News Channel into a late-night ratings juggernaut. There's a new establishment in town. The culture is shifting. When you look at the ratings for a lot of these late-night shows, they don't have the key demo. And the people they do have, the older liberal types, we had a conversation on IRL that was fascinating. Someone was mentioning to us that their parents are the boomers who watch late night TV. But late night TV is making fun of them now all day, every day. So they just don't watch it. Colbert mocks them and their ideas. Surprise, surprise, people are flocking to Fox News, but even the key demo is flocking to Fox News. So what could it be? Maybe the reason late night TV is in decline is because you are stodgy, insane, boring authoritarians. It's not right wing or left wing. Here we go. Joe Rogan, right wing comedy, writes Fast Company. They say, it was one of the most spectacular TV flops of the 21st century. Late in the second term of President George W. Bush in 2007, Fox News decided that it had the right-wing alternative to Comedy Central's popular The Daily Show. The half-hour news hour would puncture liberal pieties and media bias in the fashion that Jon Stewart and his cast of fake correspondents fired barbs at conservatives. The show tanked hard, more or less after the pilot aired in February 2007. And with its failure, modern progressives and future leftists had all the evidence they needed. Conservatives weren't funny. For the last 15 years, that take, frequently informed by one failed late-night show, had stuck among anyone who wasn't conservative. But all the while, right-wingers were making comedy and succeeding. Some of it flew under the radar in subterranean clubs and YouTube channels, but there were also the popular sitcoms of Tim Allen, Kevin James, Dennis Miller, and owning libs content, populating your dad's Facebook feed, from Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire, and most notably the rise of Joe Rogan. You see, Joe Rogan is not right-wing. Joe Rogan's borderline socialist. They just don't get it. This should be a white pill moment. They are losing their minds. You know, I looked at the ratings. I think I have the ratings here. Top 50 programs on cable, The Five, 3.5 million. Wow. Tucker Carlson Tonight, 3.3 million. Whoa. Jesse Waters, 2.9. Yowza. Hannity, 2.8. Wow, Jesse Waters is beating Hannity. Brett Baer, 2.5. Ingram Angle, 2.5. Gutfeld, 1.9. Outnumbered. Why is Fox News the top of all programs? Isn't that amazing? Then you come down here, you got Chris Hayes, you got Deadline, you got Joy Reid. Here's what you need to understand about these ratings. Tucker Carlson, that is a massively impressive nearly 3.4 million viewers. And only about 400,000 are in the key demo. That's interesting, isn't it? 3 million or so people are older than 54 years old, and they watch Tucker Carlson. Like Tucker, they're probably leaning Gen X. The key demo it's 18 to 54 for the most part. The money demo, they call it, where people are buying stuff, the demographic you want to advertise to. When you take a look at CNN Newsroom, their key demo ratings are like 90,000 or 100,000. And I thought about this, and I thought about the work that we do here at Timcast and Timcast IRL and what I'm doing now, and I'm like, man, I can't hang with that. 3 point whatever million, and then I realized something. The times are a-changing, and it's going to be really interesting. My key demo ratings for this show, almost all of the viewership. So these videos, depending on the time of season, election season, 300 to 500,000, it's crazy, but it's all key demographic. All. A little bit being a little hyperbolic, it's like 95%. That's crazy. Maybe like 80 to 95%, depending on the video. Timcast IRL is like 90% key demographic. That means we're hitting across the board like 500,000 views in the key demographic on the full podcast alone. And then on our clips, it's another 600,000-700,000. We're looking at like 1 million or so unique views in the key demo. Now, we're not the same format as Tucker Carlson. His content gets views on YouTube as well. But in terms of their late night shows, key demographic, that's where things get interesting. Because what's going to happen is that boomers are going to age out. They're going to retire. They're going to stop watching TV. They're going to pass on. Similar things will happen to Gen Xers. When we are in our 40s and 50s, it's going to be us. It's going to be the massive viewership. But I think it's being split up. Cable TV has high ratings among older viewers because they all watch the same thing. Younger people will watch a bunch of different shows, and I don't think we will see a return to that degree of viewership. I'm not convinced that Timcast IRL will be getting 3 to 5 million views per night. I think we'll probably stay around where we are, because with the ability to watch whatever you want, one channel on Fox News, one show on Fox News, now people can watch 10 different versions of it, and they will. Take a look at this. Fast Company says, while liberals lost their way doing orange man bad comedy during the Trump administration, a new ecosystem emerged of right-wing comedians. On podcasts, YouTube, and yes, Fox News has been growing increasingly popular for their transgressive and anti-trans humor. Matt Sienkiewicz, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, and Nick Marks, media studies professors at Boston College, spent untold hours consuming right-wing comedy to produce their new book, That's Not Funny, How the Right Wing Makes Comedy Work for Them. The reality is, it is funny. You just are stodgy losers who can't make jokes. I pulled up The Onion, and then I was like, remember when The Onion was funny? Off-duty officer instinctively reaches to turn off body camera during argument with wife. Huh? Yeah, I guess. Infographic, the pros and cons of letting children die. I'm like, oh, okay. When I mention that The Onion isn't funny, not anymore, people on the left get really angry. Stop making fun of our sacred cows. The Onion is ours. The Onion used to be funny. Take a look at this. Overcome stress by visualizing it as a greedy, hook-nosed race of creatures. One of the most infamous and famous clips from The Onion from 2010 with 1.6 million views. In it, it's a mock morning show where a woman basically says that if you want to get rid of your money stress, visualize hook-nosed, greedy race of creatures. The joke is she's an anti-Semite. And it's funny because it's supposed to be a morning show, but the woman is detestable. It's shock content. It's edgy humor, not meant to be taken literally. But I wonder, people on the left don't understand humor. Maybe it's because, here's what I think happened. When I was young, I watched South Park. When I grow up, you have the social justice left that just adheres to the tribalism, and so they say that's not allowed. So they cut that out of their media diets. People like me say, I don't care what's allowed. I like jokes. So I end up reading the Babylon Bee instead of The Onion, the Christian conservative satire news site. It's funnier. They make funnier segments. They're more culturally relevant. That's where I think we're going. I had a conversation with some people I knew from Vice. And I mentioned to them that, back in the day, Vice was edgy. They'd make offensive articles. Here's the example. There's an app. It's an AI app. You take a picture of a woman, and the AI will, using the shape of her body, render an image of her topless with no shirt on. And they wrote the article, this horrible app or something like that. This horrible app will show you any woman topless. I said to them, you realize that in 2010, Vice would have titled the article, this awesome app will show you any woman topless. Vice changed. And they said, well, I guess you're right. Yeah, we did. We can't do that stuff anymore. And I'm like, why not? Why can't you? I don't know. They just decided they couldn't. Well, other people are still doing it, and they're having a good go of it. And they're winning because regular people like freedom. Whatever the cult is, they don't like freedom. But again, I'll throw it back in time. It's multifaceted. On the left, they claim they are pro-free speech. They're trying to maximize the speech of those who would be suppressed or oppressed. They say the right is trying to ban books. I think the establishment has always feigned being pro-free speech, and they slowly allowed people to push the boundaries to challenge traditional culture, but only as much as they would allow. That's why you see Tipper Gore in the 80s. Now that the establishment is losing, they've lost control of the narrative. They are desperately trying to latch on to whatever they can. Joe Rogan must be right-wing because the left are the true virtuous people, right? They were the ones who knew it was best for you. It's not so cut and dry. It is very much so a major cultural shift that the left believes they are pro-free speech by protecting marginalized voices. The right says they're pro-free speech for allowing people to speak. And the reality is the cultures are just breaking apart. That's where we really are at. But Joe Rogan, I think, shouldn't be surprised that it's the right that's defending him because to the left, Joe, you are right-wing. Now, you might say you're a liberal, and so would I. I'd say you're a liberal. I'd say I'm a liberal. We were hanging out with Brandon Strzok of Walk Away the other day, and he said to me before the show, he's like, so are you conservative now or what? And I was like, no. I don't. Nothing makes sense anymore, does it? Joe, if we go by the language of the left, is right-wing. If we go by what's true, Joe's a liberal and so am I. But does that really matter when we're up against the left and they view anyone who's not in agreement with them right-wing? What does right-wing even mean at this point? We're not even speaking the same language, and that's the issue. Well, anyway, I don't know, a little bit all over the place, but you get the point. I'll leave it there. Right-wing comedy has taken over. Let it be a white pill moment, I suppose. Because if they're going to give up Joe Rogan and say he's right-wing, well, then so be it. I'm sure the right's happy to have him. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.